Hey everyone, and a massive, warm welcome to the channel. Wherever you are right now, thank you for hitting play. Sending you all huge virtual hugs and wishing you nothing but incredible health, strength, and positive energy today and always. Stay amazing. Okay, let's dive into a story that sounds like pure legend, but is shockingly real. Imagine a teenage peasant girl, barely 17 years old, dressed in men's armor, riding at the head of a battered French army, claiming she's been sent by God himself to save her country. Sounds like fantasy, right? But this is Joan of Arc. We know the basics. She heard voices, led armies, was burned at the stake, became a saint. But what if I told you her real story is 10 times wilder, more tragic, and more politically explosive than the simplified legend? What if the voices were just the beginning of a tale filled with mind-blowing courage, ruthless betrayal, and a courtroom drama that changed history? Stick with me, because we're peeling back centuries of myth to meet the real Joan, not just a saintly symbol, but a flesh-and-blood farm girl who defied kings, shattered expectations, and paid the ultimate price in a conspiracy that stank of politics and fear. So, who was Joan, really? Picture a small village called Domremy in northeastern France, around 1412. France wasn't France as we know it. It was being ripped apart by the brutal 100 Years' War with England. English armies and their Burgundian allies, French nobles siding with England, controlled huge chunks of the country, including Paris. The French king, Charles VII, wasn't even crowned yet and was holed up south of the Loire River, paralyzed by doubt and defeatism. His own mother had declared him illegitimate. The situation was dire. France seemed on the brink of collapse. Into this chaos stepped a girl named Jeanne d'Arc, born to peasant farmers, Jacques and Isabelle. She wasn't educated. She couldn't read or write. She spent her days tending sheep, sewing, spinning wool, helping in the fields, and praying intensely in the village church. She was deeply, passionately devout. Then, around age 13, her world changed. She started hearing voices. She described them as saints. Saint Michael, the warrior archangel, Saint Catherine, a wise virgin martyr, and Saint Margaret, another early Christian martyr. These weren't whispers, they were clear, commanding voices. And their message was earth-shattering. God had chosen her, Jeanne the peasant girl, for a sacred mission. She must go to the uncrowned Dauphin, Prince Charles, lift the English siege of the critical city of Orléans, lead him to the traditional coronation city of Reims, and drive the English out of France. Imagine the weight of that. A teenage girl being told she must essentially save her nation. Her first reaction? Terror. She resisted. How could she do this? She was just a girl, poor, unknown. But the voices persisted, growing more urgent as France's situation worsened. They guided her, reassured her, and gave her an unshakable conviction. This wasn't a quiet, private faith, it was a call to action that would propel her onto the world stage. Getting anyone to listen was her first impossible battle. Around age 16, she convinced a local nobleman, Robert de Baudricourt, to give her an escort to Charles's court. It took months of persistence. He laughed at her initially, a village girl in a simple red dress spouting divine missions. Her neighbors mocked her. But she wouldn't back down. She predicted a military reversal near Orleans before news of it arrived, a prediction that finally made Baudricourt take notice. He gave her a sword, men's clothes, crucial for safe travel through hostile territory, and a small escort. The journey to Charles's court at Chinon was perilous, over 300 miles through enemy-controlled lands. She traveled disguised as a male page. When she finally reached Chinon in February 1429, the Dauphin tested her. He hid among his courtiers. Yet, Joan, who had never seen him, walked straight through the crowded hall and knelt before him. Legend says she told him a secret prayer he'd made only to God, proving her divine connection. Historians debate the details, but her confidence and uncanny insight convinced the desperate Dauphin. Still, he was cautious. He sent her to Poitiers to be examined by a panel of skeptical theologians, priests, and lawyers for weeks. They grilled her relentlessly about her faith, her voices, her intentions. Was she a heretic? Delusional? A fraud? Joan stood firm. She spoke with simple, direct conviction. She wasn't asking for money or power, she said, only the chance to serve God and France. Her unwavering faith and clarity impressed even these learned men. They found no evil in her, only goodness, humility, virginity, devotion, honesty, and simplicity. They couldn't explain her, but they couldn't condemn her either. Charles, with few options left, decided to gamble. He gave her armor, a banner, her famous white banner fleur-de-lis with Jesus Maria, a household staff, and assigned veteran commanders to accompany her, not lead her, but follow her guidance. The peasant girl was now entrusted with the fate of France. Her first target, Orléans. This city was the key to southern France. It had been under brutal English siege for months. Its fall would open the floodgates to English conquest. The situation was desperate. Joan arrived in April 1429, a beacon of hope dressed in gleaming white armor, riding a white horse. Her impact was electric, but also baffling to the hardened soldiers. She didn't act like a typical commander. She banished prostitutes from the army camp, insisted the men go to confession, forbade looting or swearing, and carried her banner into battle instead of a sword. She claimed her role was to carry God's banner, not kill. The cynical French soldiers were initially skeptical. But Joan radiated a confidence that bordered on the supernatural. She sent bold messages to the English commanders demanding they surrender and leave France, signed simply, Jehan the Maid. They mocked her, calling her names. Then came the fighting. Joan wasn't a tactical mastermind in the traditional sense, she relied on her commanders for that. But she was fearless, constantly at the front, rallying the troops when morale flagged. Her presence was transformative. When she was wounded by an arrow in the shoulder during an assault on a key fortress, she pulled it out herself and returned to the fight. This raw courage ignited the French soldiers. They fought like men possessed. Within just 9 days of her arrival, the siege that had lasted months was broken. The English were routed. Orléans was saved. It was a miracle in the eyes of the French people. Joan, the Maid of Orléans, became an overnight legend, a living symbol of hope and divine favor. Her victory proved the voices right in the most spectacular way possible and gave Charles VII the momentum he desperately needed. Flush with the triumph at Orléans, Joan turned to her next divine orders: clear the Loire Valley of English strongholds and take the Dauphin to Reims for his coronation. Reims was deep in enemy territory, far to the north. It seemed impossible. But Joan, fueled by her mission and the fervor of her troops, led a whirlwind campaign. Town after town surrendered or fell to the revitalized French army. Key battles like Poitiers in June 1429 were decisive French victories, shattering English field armies. Joan's reputation as an invincible holy warrior grew, spreading terror among the English and Burgundians. By mid-July, against all odds, the path to Reims was open. On July 17, 1429, in the magnificent Reims Cathedral, Charles VII was crowned King of France, with Joan standing proudly beside him, holding her banner. This was the pinnacle of her mission. It legitimized Charles in the eyes of France and Europe. It fulfilled the promise she had made to the Voices. To many, it seemed God truly was on France's side, working through this extraordinary peasant girl. Joan wept at the ceremony. She had done it. She asked Charles to release her from her duty, longing to return home. But Charles and his advisors, seeing her immense value as a symbol and morale booster, persuaded her to stay. This was a critical turning point. The purely spiritual mission was now tangled with messy, dangerous politics. The tide, however, began to turn. After Reims, the urgency seemed to fade for Charles and his court. They preferred cautious diplomacy to Joan's aggressive push for total liberation, especially towards Paris, still held by the English and Burgundians. Joan felt the Voices urging her forward. In September 1429, against the king's more hesitant strategy, she led an assault on Paris. It failed. Joan was wounded again, this time in the thigh. Charles called off the attack. The defeat damaged her aura of invincibility. Over the next months, frustration mounted. The king sidelined her, sending her on minor campaigns. The Voices continued to guide her, but their messages became more somber, warning her she would be captured soon. In May 1430, outside the town of Compiègne, which was under Burgundian siege, Joan led a sortie to help the defenders. Outnumbered, the French were forced to retreat back towards the town gates. Joan, famously courageous to the point of recklessness, stayed behind to cover the retreat. As the gates slammed shut, possibly deliberately closed early to keep the Burgundians out, Joan was yanked from her horse and captured by Burgundian soldiers. King Charles VII, the man she had crowned, made no serious effort to rescue her or ransom her. He abandoned her. This betrayal was likely political. Joan's immense popularity made her a potential threat, and her capture might have been seen as a convenient way to remove her. The Burgundians, knowing her immense value, sold her to their English allies for a huge sum. For the English, capturing Joan was a major coup. She was the symbol of French resistance, the witch who had humiliated their armies. They weren't just holding a prisoner of war, they were determined to destroy her reputation, her legitimacy, and her very soul. Joan's real nightmare began. The English didn't just want to kill her, they wanted to discredit everything she stood for, her mission, her victories, and crucially, the legitimacy of Charles VII, whom she had crowned. If they could prove Joan was a heretic or a witch, guided by demons, not God, then Charles's coronation, achieved through her, would be invalid. They handed her over to the church for trial, specifically to an ecclesiastical court controlled by Pierre Cauchon, the fiercely pro-English Bishop of Beauvais. This was key. A religious trial, not a military one. Her charges: heresy, witchcraft, dressing in men's clothes, cross-dressing was considered a serious religious crime, and disobeying the church. Her trial in Rouen, English-held territory, from January to May 1431 was a horrifying travesty of justice. It wasn't about finding truth, it was about finding her guilty. Cauchon and his assessors were hostile, determined to break her. Joan, imprisoned in a secular, English-guarded prison, not the church prison for women she should have been in, was chained, constantly watched by male guards, threatened with torture, and relentlessly interrogated for hours, day after day, often tricked with complex theological questions designed to trap her. She had no legal counsel. The transcript of her trial, miraculously preserved, shows her astonishing intelligence, courage, and faith under this unimaginable pressure. She answered cleverly, defended her Voices, insisted she obeyed God. She refused to recant her mission or deny the source of her guidance. She asked repeatedly to be sent to the Pope, her true church authority, but was refused. They focused intensely on her wearing men's clothes, a symbol of her defiance and independence. They tried to get her to admit her voices were demonic. They twisted her words. The psychological torture was immense. Exhausted, ill, and terrified, Joan finally broke. Faced with the threat of being burned immediately, she signed a document she couldn't read. She was illiterate, recanting her voices and agreeing to wear women's clothes. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. But then, a few days later, terrified by her guards, or possibly tricked, she put the men's clothes back on. The reasons are debated, perhaps because they tried to make her wear a dress while leaving her vulnerable to assault by her guards, perhaps because she felt she had betrayed her voices. This sealed her fate. The court declared her a relapsed heretic. There was no saving her now. On May 30th, 1431, in the old market square of Rouen, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. She was just 19 years old. The English, fearing her charisma even in death, ensured the spectacle was brutal. A huge crowd gathered. She was led out wearing a mitre inscribed, "Heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater," tied to a tall pillar on a platform piled high with wood. As the flames rose, she called out repeatedly for Jesus, forgave her accusers, and asked for prayers. Witnesses reported she died calling Jesus' name. To ensure nothing remained for veneration, the English burned her body twice more, reducing it to ashes, which they scattered in the same river. They wanted Joan erased. But they failed. Her death was a martyrdom that seared her legend into French consciousness. The English had hoped killing her would break French spirit. It did the opposite. Her sacrifice became a rallying cry. The war dragged on, but French fortunes gradually improved. Crucially, in 1456, 25 years after her death, King Charles VII, now secure on his throne, ordered a posthumous retrial. The verdict of 1431 was overturned. The Rouen trial was declared corrupt, unjust, and invalid. Joan was declared innocent, a faithful daughter of the Church. Centuries later, in 1920, she was officially declared a saint by the Catholic Church. So, who was Joan of Arc really? She was a peasant girl whose profound, personal faith gave her the courage to defy impossible odds. She was a military figure who changed the course of a war not through tactical genius, but through sheer force of will and an ability to inspire exhausted men to believe in victory again. She was a political pawn used by a weak king who then abandoned her when she became inconvenient. She was the victim of a rigged show trial orchestrated by enemies hiding behind the cloak of religion. She was a teenager who faced torture and a horrific death with astonishing bravery and unwavering faith in her divine mission. Her story isn't just about battles and voices, it's about the collision of intense personal conviction with ruthless political power. It's about how a society treats those who challenge its norms, especially a poor, young woman claiming divine authority. Joan shattered every expectation of her class and gender. She proved that conviction, however it comes, can move mountains. Her brief, blazing life, barely 2 years from leaving Domremy to her death in Rouen, reshaped France and left an indelible mark on history. She remains an icon of French nationalism, of female empowerment, of unwavering faith, and of the tragic cost of speaking truth to power. The real Joan isn't just the saint in stained glass. She's the frightened yet defiant teenager facing her judges, the determined girl riding into battle under a banner of faith, the courageous voice that refused to be silenced, even by fire. Her story is a raw, powerful reminder of the extraordinary things one ordinary person, driven by belief, can achieve, and the darkness they can face. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If this journey into the heart of Joan of Arc's story moved or surprised you, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating figures, and let me know in the comments, what part of her incredible journey resonates most with you. Take care, cherish your convictions, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.